Welcome to the Empowerment Zone with Ramona Houston, where we zone in on Black and Brown relations and our journey to empowering our communities.
Thank you for joining the Empowerment Zone. I am your host, Ramona Houston. Everybody has a purpose in life, and your purpose is totally unique to you. There's a process of discovering your purpose, but once you figure out your purpose, it's on. You're passionate about your work. You're passionate about building the relationships that enhance your work, and you're passionate about making an impact on people's lives. And that's what we're all about here at the Empowerment Zone, about social impact and empowering our communities. Welcome to the Empowerment Zone. I am your host, Ramona Houston. And today we are speaking to Tracey Greene-Washington about her new book, Choosing Purposeful Alignment, The Messy Middle of Transformation. Tracey has been a guest on the Empowerment Zone. This is her second time joining us. And this woman is all about making change. She works in the philanthropic community engagement area. She has her own business, Indigo Innovations Group. She's also building African American and Latino relations through her organization there in North Carolina. And so I'm really excited about having her here again at the Empowerment Zone because I just enjoy talking to her. We feel like we're sisters already, and it's just great to be with and around and build relationships with affirming people who are also about really impacting their communities, nation, and world. So welcome, Tracey, to the Empowerment Zone again.
Thank you, Ramona. I'm so glad to be back with you. Just like you gave those flowers to me, I give it back to you. The opportunity to share space with you and have these meaty discussions are so powerful. And I'm so appreciative that you would have me back to talk about the book, to talk about what does it mean to choose purposeful alignment and why it is important in this moment. So thank you.
Thank you. So tell us, before you get into the book, tell us about your trajectory in terms of going to write a book. What made you go ahead and start putting pen to paper or notes to the computer, since we don't really do pen and paper much anymore? Tell us about your process of writing in the book, and then let's get right into the contents in your argument.
Yeah. So, I didn't start out with the idea that I would write a book. What was happening is that when I made a big transition to move into the space of a sabbatical and to reset and to take time, began to get a number of emails and from different individuals that were watching my journey of resetting, of taking care of myself, and began to be asked about to sit on several panels to talk about my experience, my journey of doing this work, and why I had decided to take such a huge shift or to make such a huge shift in terms of this time that I was taking for myself. And out of that conversation, I had a mentee who I would talk to often, and I would sit on panels and talk about my journey and where I was. And she said, I really think you should write this down. And, for us, we're having conversations with other women, other partners, other peers. We don't think that we're saying anything significant. But what was beautiful about what she was saying is that she was asking me to pay attention that because I was being asked to sit on so many panels, because individuals were pulling me into these conversations, that people wanted to know. and wanted to hear that perspective. And so as a result of that, I really was able to move into this process of beginning to document and figure out how I wanted to talk about this journey, to talk about what choosing purposeful alignment meant to me and my journey. And I think most importantly, be clear about why I wanted to write the book. And when I got clear about that this idea of understanding that how do we support leaders and leaderful organizations that are addressing complex social change and innovating for the future? How do we support them in a way where they have the tools, the resources, the networks, right? To be able to move through and navigate challenging moments, to be able to arrive just in a place where they need to be and be affirmed that that is the role that they are uniquely designed to play in this work around complex social change. Now, I'd be remiss that if I didn't say, because I had never written a book before, I was able to get the support of a writing midwife. Her name is Anita Henderson, and she was able to be my accountability partner and to pull out of me these nuggets that you find in the book and helping me to create a more succinct story that wasn't about Tracey, but was very much about this journey that we all have to travel to get to this place where we know we're on purpose and we're doing exactly what we're called to do.
So once you decided, took your mentee's advice, and you call yourself the mentor, and she's she's mentoring you, you need to write.
Very much so. That happens that way, right?
Yeah, yeah. And that's what relationships are all about, is being reciprocal, right?
Mhm.
And she really inspired you to write your book, as I'm sure you're inspiring her. In working with the author's midwife,
Mhm.
Anita Wilson, I'm sure that was a very inspiring relationship. She's great in working with her. What did you really want when people pick up this book? When you first started, what
Mhm.
did you want them to get out of it? And then at the end, what did it end up being?
Yeah. I think for me, I think the place I have to start is that first of all, the book was birthed out of a tension within me, right? This tension of being very clear about what my unique role was, my unique calling, and where I wanted to be positioned to do the work in the most impactful way. Not just about success, but in a significant way that was about doing legacy building work. And this tension of really figuring out where the places, spaces, and relationships that I should actually be in to actually do that work, right? And so for me, being able to start there really laid the foundation of thinking about why I should write the book, why it could be important, and understanding the power of coaching along with that. That in these moments when we're navigating new spaces that can be disorienting and distracting, wouldn't it be very exciting to have a guide or a tool as we're navigating the messy middle, right? The gap between where you currently are and your desired purpose. And what if you had stories, affirmations, questions that could support you in arriving just where you're supposed to arrive at? And so the book was designed to help those who wanted to do something bold and audacious, that were afraid or maybe saw themselves as game changers and wanted to figure out how they could harness all of their tools and resources in service to that and anchor what they were doing in their values in an unapologetic way and helping them to have a place. And in some ways, like a mini sabbatical, right? The book being the placeholder for them to do that work so that they could show up in the work, show up in the world, show up in their personal relationships in a way that was bringing their full selves into the room, which is necessary for us to do this work, right?
Yeah, exactly. I want to go back to something you said earlier, that there was this tension. What can you expand upon the tension? Why was it intention? Why did you experience tension between what you wanted to do and positioning yourself? I would like you to expand on that thought.
Yeah. And I don't think it was about positioning myself. I think the tension was So my background is that I came into this work as a community organizer, right? And that has shaped very much my values around centering communities, centering the voices of those that have been most impacted, understanding that their voices allow for us to come up with the most bold and audacious solutions to some of the most complex and vexing
Mm-hmm.
issues that are
Mm-hmm.
impacting us, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and for me, my elders taught me, when you commit to doing this work, you have to be intentional in everything that you do, right?
Correct. Correct.
And so for me, I was very clear of what my role was, my work was, and how I wanted to do the work. For example, a lot of my work that I focus on is systems change. And when I think about systems change, I think about it in three ways: that you're working within the system
Mm-hmm.
to help it work better, right? To be more
Mm-hmm.
aligned, to be more
Mm-hmm.
impactful or more coordinated. Then you're working on the fringes of the system where you're pushing the system
Correct.
to really think about and ask provocative questions of it, right? And even support leaders within the system to be able to step
Correct.
outside of the box and think in a provocative way. And then I think in the system, there's this work that's totally outside of it, where you innovate and you're creating new models and tools that
Correct.
you introduce back into the system, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What I was clear about was that I had worked in a system, I had done good work, I felt good about it. But I understood, in terms of the significant work that I desired to do, it was on the fringes of pushing a system and helping other leaders to be able to navigate, to be bolder, to take risk in a way that maybe they haven't been able to, and need cover, right, and support to do that. And also that I love this work where I was innovating and creating new tools and
Mm-hmm.
resources that could be introduced back into it.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, the tension was that I had made a commitment to a particular place that was out of alignment with where I saw and wanted to facilitate change. And so really being able to reconcile, and also being able to reconcile if that was true, right? Or if that was just a feeling, right? And having to step back to notice the signs and signals, having to step back to think about how these places and relationships either were in service to where I needed to go, or were in service to where I needed to go, was a big part of the tension relative to that. So it wasn't about positioning, it was making sure I was doing the work in the right places, in the right spaces as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
it could have been that place or it could be other
Yeah.
places, but
Yeah.
I had to get very clear.
On
Or
what
it
it
could
was.
have or it could have been that place, and was I not thinking about it in a way that allowed me to have clarity around the decision and choice points that I needed to make going forward.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So tell us about, thank you for expanding upon that. So tell us about this book. I got it right here and reading it. It's really good. And for my audience, y'all know I interviewed Dr. Patricia Parker. And these two books really go hand in hand in terms of, Dr. Patricia Parker's concept on community organizing, looking at Ella Baker's leadership. So tell us about the book, and why should people go in and purchase this book and read it for themselves? What will they get out of it?
Yeah. So one of the first things that you'll notice when you read the book, first of all, the beautiful colors, because this book is about being bold, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
In the first introduction to the book, it is a proposition to all the game changers, new, seasoned, and emerging,
mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm,
And so this book is not for the weary. It's
mm-hmm.
very much about those that are clear that their role is to facilitate change, to innovate for the future, to be able to drive and to use their voice in a way that's necessary to move critical work right going forward. And so the book itself is designed around this proposition if people choose it, this proposition of seeing themselves as a game changer. And when I say a game changer, not from an arrogant perspective, but a game changer that is clear about their role in facilitating change, that's clear about anchoring their work and their values, is clear about that in order to do this work, you have to be in this ongoing cycle of evolving and learning and unlearning and relearning. And lastly, a game changer is ready to use every resource at their arsenal to support and facilitate transformational change, not performative change, but transformational change. So first of all, the book is not for everybody. But for those that want to take on this challenge, it is a great read and a great guide for them. And the book is designed in a way to move you through 3 explicit choice points. And when I talk about choice points are these compounded choices that add up to big movement and big change. And the first one is really centered around, which I think is foundational, this notion of the power of permission. And it talks about how oftentimes we wrestle in doing this work with permission and power. And it elevates and it forces this conversation about the fact that it's not our principal struggle to wrestle with it. It is our work to redefine it. When we look at it that way, then we begin to look at power in a different way. It's not the antiquated way of power over. It's very much about building and sharing power together. And so if you're thinking about that in terms of power and how you exercise it, that you're building and sharing it together, this kind of surrender to what it could be and what it could facilitate in your work and your relationships and institutions and community begins to evolve as well. The next part of it really talks about, even in the power of permission, of what are the signs are you noticing? What is your willingness in terms of this having a positive disruption in your life, like a choice? The reality is nothing happens without movement. So you have to be the activator of your own movement and change. And all of that starts with saying yes. What I found in myself and in conversation after conversation, when we do this work, when we're trying to facilitate this type of work, it's hard for us to say yes to ourselves. We say yes to everybody else. And so the book allows the space in each of these sections that I'm going to go over for you to consider what would be your first yes. And if you're going to say that first yes, what are the 3 no's that you have to consider? And allow the space to sit back, allow yourself to step back into the space to see what is the result, the ripple as a result of you saying this yes out loud.
So now,
and making a commitment to your no and seeing what can emerge as a result of it, right?
So now when you're talking about personal transformation and you're talking about saying yes and no,
Yes.
that's hard for people, right?
It is very hard for people. The reality is it brings up all these feelings of worthiness, of fear, right? Of stories, narratives that continue to play out in our head. And so the book is designed in a way that it has supportive coaching questions to ask you more probing questions about what are you noticing? What is the patterns within yourself? What are the things you have to interrupt? What are the disempowering beliefs that you have to stop? Who from your community do you need support in this moment to move into this new space, right? And what are the kind of additional areas that you want to explore as a result of it? And so you'll see this cadence throughout the book in each section. And it's designed, as I said, in 3 sections. The first one, focusing on this power of permission. And I emphasize that because if you don't give yourself permission, you won't be ready for the other 2 parts of the book, the other 2 choices that you have to make to fully live into what purposeful alignment is, right? So the next choice is about this notion of leaning into transformation. And I lead and talk about the book about this juxtaposition of this tension about transformation that, and I call it transformation trauma. You know, when we read self-help books and other books, we think about transformation as positive, but on the other side of it, it can be perceived as traumatic, particularly when you don't like change, right? And so this notion of transformation trauma, that you can hold both of these concepts in both of your hands and name them, is a part of you really being able to lean into and take your power back from that. And being able to identify where there is some stories or questions that are bubbling up and give you the space to kind of move through those for what they are and what they aren't. And to be able to discard the things that are no longer serving you and replace them with things that are serving you. And in the section when I talk about the second choice of leaning into transformation, We deal with and talk about resetting. We talk about respite, right? What we know about resting is in respite is liberation, right? And the reality is, if you're tired, you cannot see what's in front of you. You're disoriented. You don't have the energy. In the book, I talk about the fact that I slept for 45 days. 45 days. And I often ask people who are doing this work, who are facilitating transformation work, do you really know how tired you are?
45 days is a long time to rest, but that means you were moving, and not giving time for yourself. And,
Yes,
there's a lot of work being put out now about people saying, people telling people, the experts sharing that we're not machines. We just can't go on, and even a machine's got to quit at some point in time, but human beings need rest, and we need
yes.
time to reflect. We need time to just
But we
rejuvenate.
but we have to choose it, because
Yes.
if we've normalized this as a way that we move,
Hmm. Hmm.
then you need time to even have the conversation about how this isn't normal, right?
Hmm.
For me, from a personal perspective, what I thought was normal in terms of my body rhythm of moving and working was not normal. And the way I did my work before, my body won't even move in that way anymore after
Hmm.
resting and resetting, right?
Hmm.
And so we talk about this notion of resetting, resting, experimenting, and retooling. Because oftentimes we don't give ourselves the space to even experiment about what could be possible, right? So, how do we give ourselves space to experiment, to build out what is new for the future, right? If we're tired, if we haven't had respite, right?
Hmm.
And we can't experiment if we're not, we can't retool if we're not willing to experiment. That
Hmm.
in this new phase of really thinking about transformation, the fact is that you'll put new tools in your toolkit.
Hmm.
There'll be processes, there'll be relationships, there'll be people, there'll be perspectives, there'll be all these new things that you'll add to your toolkit. I don't know what your toolkit's going to look like. Everyone's toolkit will look different, right? And at the end of that section, again, true to the cadence, is a set of coaching questions. And it asks you, what is your yes? And what are your three no's? And what is the result of you kind of creating space to see that kind of manifest?
Yeah, that whole transformation process, that's a good chapter. And like you said, you can't innovate if you're tired and you're not thinking straight. You can't come up with new ideas. But more
Hmm.
so when you talked about the toolkit, all the things that are available to you that you can't see because you're tired and you're foggy, and that rest really brings out the best in you, right?
It does. I would say I'm probably the most creative that I've ever been in my career. And my reputation is that people will say Tracey is probably one of the most innovative, creative people that they know, right? What I will say is by resting, retooling, and transforming, I can lean into that, right? That
Mhm.
narrative,
Mhm.
because I'm constantly seeing things that I couldn't see before.
Mhm.
Oh, that's a gap. Oh, that's an opportunity. And even in how I began to talk with individuals, that seeing the opportunity in everything, first acknowledging, affirming, and seeing the opportunity. Is there a different way for us to look at this? Is this a different way for us to reframe it? What is the possibility here? What's the opportunity here? What are the blind spots? So taking the time to even have the space to ask those questions of myself and others, I mean, that's part of the transformational process. So when people engage with me, even from a consulting perspective, I've had to help clients engage with me in a different way versus what they were used to doing with a consultant working with them around the issue. I said, like, this work is co-created, it's collaborative. We need time, we need space to talk. We need to unpack it. Where are we really going? What would this enable us to do differently? Before, I don't think that I would have had the words or would intentionally create the space, even in my consulting practice, to have that as a part of even the development of the scope and agreement about how we're going to move together in partnership with one another. And the last choice point, the last big choice is about becoming a game changer, right? And being able to lean into that game changer posture of all those things I've talked about before, right? And being very clear about what that requires of you. So it requires of you to use your voice, to help to create healthy, equitable relationships. It requires you to set healthy boundaries. It requires of you to interrupt narratives, and it may even require you to reintroduce yourself, because for others that have seen this transformation, they may not know what this is, and it may create discomfort for them. And so it creates space for you to reintroduce yourself, and it allows you to see who will continue to be a part of your circle and who will be right sized and transition out of your circle as well, right? Because the reality is it's a non-negotiable for you to not be purposefully aligned. And when I talk about purposeful alignment, Ramona, I'm talking about the unwavering clarity regarding your unique calling and unique role in this world and your work and your relationships, coupled with your ability to use your lived experiences, your talents, and resources in service to transformational change and innovation. It's just a non-negotiable.
I love that definition. As a matter of fact, I highlighted it in the book. I really, really, and you said it almost verbatim. That unwavering clarity,
Yeah.
and and positioning your voice, your unique gifts, role, and compounded experiences. I love that. I love that definition of what purposeful alignment is. And if you're able to us give do the foundational work, like you said, the power of permission, the transformational work,
Mhm.
and then embrace becoming a game changer, then you're really on to purposeful alignment. And
Yeah.
that's what this book is all about.
And it is, this progression is the messy middle.
Hmm.
It is the messy middle. And the book is designed for you to protect this space and have a space within your life to do this work. You owe it to yourself. And oftentimes, I know that I had the privilege to be able to take a sabbatical. Now, I know the sabbatical came at, my husband and I having to plan, right? We had to sacrifice, et cetera, to allow me to have the space. But I said, well, how can we create mini sabbaticals for individuals that need to do this work? And I think both the book provides that space for people to protect that, right? And also, I created another additional tool called the Aligned Intensive Series. And we're in our first year of doing it, for peers to come together who are all at an inflection point, both personally and professionally, around purposeful alignment, and walking them through this process, through these three choices, through peer dialogue, presentation, and coaching, to allow them to make choices. So at the end of this process, they begin to think and feel and be really explicit about where they are landing in service to where they want to be for 2022.
Hmm.
So they are planting the seeds that will bloom and blossom for the next year, and really reintroduce themselves in terms of what this process has and space has provided for them.
So that is a great group to organize. Can you tell our audience, if they want to participate in it, how can they find out more information about this group? Could you restate the name of it,
Yeah,
and how they can participate?
yeah. It's called the Aligned Intensive Series, and it's intensive in the title because it is intense, right? And we designed it to focus on the three choices. And so you have the ability to move into the conversation at three different intervals. So there's cycle one, it's focused on permission, cycle two, transformation, and cycle three is focused on becoming a game changer. And the way that you can become a part of the Line series is actually going to my website at indigoinnovationgroup.com. And there is an icon for the Line Intensive Series that you can sign up for. we're in the midst of our first cycle, but that doesn't mean that you can't join us for our second and third cycle. One of the things that I've been trying to do is to do a free masterclass before each cycle begins. And so whoever wants to join us, they will have access to the free masterclass that focused on the powerful mission. And then I'll have an upcoming class, free class that I'll begin advertising for probably in the next 3 weeks for that's focused on transformation as well. But can I add one more thing, Ramona?
Mm-hmm,
In addition to the Line series, I don't want anybody to think that, oh, I have to be a part of a series to do this deep work. It is meant to support you. It's another tool. And for those who aren't quite sure if they want to move into the work in that way, on my website, I have a tool called the Purposeful Alignment survey. And it allows you to see where you are on the journey towards purposeful alignment and to assess what is best for you. And so the survey tool moves you from this acknowledgement that you're ready to give yourself permission to even explore what could be possible, to readying yourself for your first yes, to readying yourself for transformation, to acknowledging that you're an activated game changer.
That's good. That's good. So there are several ways that people can be engaged in this purposeful alignment. You have the aligned intensive series. You have the master class that's before each of the 3 parts. And then you have the toolkit or the survey they can take that can help their own individualized process.
Yeah. And of course, you can write a book.
Yes, and fourth the book. Yes, of course. So Tracey, in the aligned intensive series, how long is each area? How many weeks should they commit to it if they do it?
Yeah, so we've tried to set it up in a way where it runs on 3-week intervals.
Okay.
And so you have 3. So for this first cycle, we have 3 sessions every 3 weeks. And each session is 90 minutes. And we purposely created it for 90 minutes because we know in this moment where everyone is doing Zoom, where everyone is like using a lot of FaceTime, wanted to figure out the right timing so that we could help individuals to share space with each other, but not feel exhausted, like feel like this is a chore, right? And so we felt like 90 minutes worked the best. Of course, there's homework in between. And we also added on an optional 30 minutes at the end of the call for group coaching, for things that are coming up for individuals who want to stay on. But it's optional. I will say with starting the session, we've had probably most everyone stay on for the additional 30 minutes to kind of further unpack. And everyone has come prepared with their homework and in some cases have asked me to coach them outside of the class because additional things, they wanted some additional space to kind of unpack some of the pieces as well. And so everybody is doing their work. This first class that we have is a really great class and they'll move through all the cycles. But there's space for other folks to join us. And I think that they would enjoy the peers that are part of this work. One of the things I've said consistently is that iron sharpens iron.
Yes.
And when we want everybody to win, everybody has the power to be able to help everybody's light shine even brighter.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I always say that no one has the monopoly on knowledge and everybody can contribute to the learning process. So that's why group coaching is so valuable. So it's 3 weeks per each skill set, right? It's three sessions within the 3 weeks, right? And then y'all move on to the next.
So it's designed where, so for example, in cycle 1, we had 1 session. Then there's 2.5 weeks in between.
I see. And then
for the next session, for this next section. And then there's 2.5 weeks in between for the next session.
So it's about 9 weeks per
So the goal is that, so the goal is that it'll take you through the end of the year. So it's it ends up being a 9-month process if that's what you want to commit to. You don't have to commit to all of it. You can have one piece of it that you commit to. But it definitely is a part of moving you through those three choices in a supported environment.
This sounds good. I'm so glad we were able to talk about your book, talk about your work to support others in the transformational process. I have one last question. Why do you call it the messy middle? I'm curious about the messy middle. Why do you call it that?
Because it's messy. But oftentimes we don't talk about, when we think about change, we want to make it neat and in a box, folded up very nicely. But the reality is when you're talking about unspoken things, new things, fears, narratives, shadows that are lurking just behind you that you battled. The only way to move through, the only way to be able to get on the other side of it is that you have to move through it. And the moving through it is not linear. It's very iterative, it's very emergent in terms of test do learning. And so it is messy, right? And the idea is that if we help you move through the messy middle through these three choices, the possibility of you being lost, getting disoriented, and just getting distracted is less, because we want you to arrive exactly where you want to be. But if you don't unpack those fears, those shadows, celebrate the moments and wins, you won't arrive at the place where you want to arrive to.
That's it. That's it.
And I give different stories throughout the book. It's a very vulnerable book in terms of the stories that I share about myself. And because I don't think that you can write a book like this and not model it, right, for others. And so it was important for me to be vulnerable in the book and lift up places where I struggled, places where I excelled, places where I had to grapple. And that's the only way I think that a book like this can be written.
Agree. Sharing stories is very powerful. And one of the things my husband and I always talk about is that people always see the end product. They don't see what you call the messy middle, right? We don't see all the work that person put in, all the changes, all the doubts and fears that they had to face before they got to their purposeful alignment. And so many times we hide those stories because, like you stated, you're in a very vulnerable position to be able to say, hey, I struggled with this, when nobody ever knew you struggled with this, because they're only seeing the end product.
Very much so. And can I tell you how many texts and emails I received from individuals saying, I didn't know you were going through that at that time. I never would have known. I didn't know you felt that way. I didn't know that you struggled in that way. We had at one of the first master classes, I had a colleague say, when I see you, I always seem poised and pulled together. And I said, isn't that always the thing? That people can present in that way. That doesn't mean that they don't have these internal things that they are grappling with. And I think the grappling is actually healthy. The grappling is an indicator that you're growing and that you're stretching. And you're naming these growing edges that have to be mined as a part of this journey. And if you don't mind those growing edges, they will come with you at the end.
They will come for you.
They will, and they'll manifest and show up in other places, other people, other relationships. So use this process to mine them, right?
Yes. Love it, love it, love it. Well, thank you so much. Again, the book is called Choosing Purposeful Alignment, The Messy Middle of Transformation. It's by Tracey, Tracey, Tracey Greene with an E, Washington. She says that in the book. Tracey Greene-Washington. And you can also sign up for her alignment intensive series. Aligned or alignment?
Aligned intensive series.
And
and folks can get the book on my website, or they can order it from Amazon as well. So whichever works best for them in terms
and
of.
And tell our audience your website again, please.
It's Indigo Innovation Group .com, and indigo like the color.
Great. Well, it's wonderful having you today. And as always, it's always nice to be in your presence and just feel your spirit over the screen. And so I'm so glad that you're doing well and everything is going fine for you.
Thank you for inviting me into the space. It's always good to have a good, juicy, meaty conversation with you.
All right.
Thank you so much.
I look forward to having you back.
Thank you. I look forward to coming back.
Hi, I have Tracey Greene-Washington here with us today, and she's going to give us a strategy for college success. Tracey, what schools, before you give your advice, what school or schools did you attend? What was your major and degrees or degree or degrees? And then give us that strategy you think that will ensure that students are successful in college.
I love it. Thank you for inviting me back to share these little nuggets, right? So I graduated with my undergrad degree from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. And my degree was a bachelor in social science with a focus on social work. I also had minors in African American studies and sociology. And then I went on to get my master's degree of social work from the University of South Carolina, with an explicit focus on this kind of macro track of looking at the macro part of social work and thinking about systems and policies and practices relative to that, and emphasizing community economic development as this more comprehensive way to support community impact. And when I think about the nugget that I would give, I think last time I talked about the power of networks. And as I think about this additional opportunity, I would say the advice I would give to a student is to be curious. There's so many things that you could potentially do. And oftentimes, depending on our family background or how we're oriented in space, we feel like we have to know exactly what we are going to do, what we want to do. And we sometimes don't allow space for us to be curious. And I think in college, there's this playground of ideas and things that we never even thought about, or maybe had not been exposed to. And so the idea that you could take multiple courses to just think about, experiment around what else could be possible, what else could evolve, what you may have already been thinking relative to your major, relative to the direction that you want to take in terms of your career as a result of getting your degree. I think that the more you experiment, the more you'll be better for it. And it will open up doors and possibilities and relationships that maybe you haven't even thought of.
Love that advice. Be curious, explore. And that means both inside the classroom and outside of the classroom, in order to widen your scope of the possibilities for your work, your life, your career. So thank you so much. Be curious.
Thank you.
A special thank you to the incredible team of the Empowerment Zone. Terry Gully, theme song, NADWorks, digital support, and of course, our featured guest.
If you enjoyed my podcast, please subscribe. We are on all of your favorite podcast platforms. Be sure to rate us on Apple Podcasts too. Thank you for your continued support.